What's good, YouTube? This is Boxingwave. Tszyu stops Tony Harrison in the ninth round. Let's talk about it. All right, first of all, it was a pretty good fight. As expected, I thought the fight did live up to what I thought it was going to be. Tszyu definitely showed that he can step it up, and he did. I think out of all the performances that I've seen throughout his career, I think that he really stepped it up in this fight. It wasn't just that he won, but he was winning the fight pretty cleared for me. I had it 6 rounds to 2, leading up to the ninth round. I could see maybe 5 rounds to 3. I know when I was looking at Twitter, some only gave Tony Harrison 1 round. All right, but I think it's somewhere around the ballpark of that. I had it 6 rounds to 2, and but it was a competitive fight. Tim definitely his shots were more effective. He is the bigger puncher between the two, so there's no surprise there. Tony did land some good shots and landed a good amount of jabs and stuff. He definitely landed good, especially after like the fourth round, fifth round. I think it's kind of strange to me because even though I did a breakdown, I never seen Tony get hit so much early in the fight. I felt like Tony was going to win the first 2 or 3 rounds, and be up early, maybe even 4 rounds. And normally he is, even in his other losses, even when he lost to, he was definitely beating Jermell in the first fight, and he got the decision there. But, when he was stopped by Willie Nelson, when he stopped by Hurd, and even when he was stopped by Jermell in the rematch, I thought that Tony was outboxing these guys earlier in the fight. The first half of the fight, I will always give Tony more rounds than his opponents. But in this fight here, Tony was never winning the fight to me. Tim was, Tony was holding his own and he was definitely landing. But I knew as early as the first round, I didn't like the way that I didn't like how Tim got so close or was able to get so close to Tony as early as the first round. Even though they weren't throwing much, neither weren't throwing much. Like Tim did land a couple sweeping left hooks in the first round, but it was the fact that he was in range so early without having to have too many issues in getting in. Because Tony always was good at controlling distance. And for whatever reason, Tim got so close to him early in this fight. And that was the first sign of this fight being a problem because Tim was already landing clean punches as early as the first and second round. Tony, when it came to Tony, he gets hit, but defensively, I never seen him get hit this much in a fight. Jermell couldn't do it. Hurd couldn't do it. Other fighters just could not land as often as Tim was. Like Tim was landing at will, and Tim was landing jabs and everything, not just power shots. So Tony in this fight, normally when he gasses out, and that's one of the things I said, I even compared him to Caleb Plant. Plant, when he starts to gas out, he start becoming more vulnerable, and he starts to get, the defenses and the reflexes are not as sharp, they're not as on point. Tony normally gets hit a lot more after he starts gassing out, like maybe the fifth, sixth round on. But in this fight here, he was catching some good ones in between the first and third round. So he didn't really have to particularly wait until he was like burnt out. And, I didn't know what approach he was going to take. I said to you guys in the prediction, I think Tony should try to use the same strategy that he used against Charlo in the rematch, where he came forward in the rematch. We haven't seen Tim really be forced to fight on his back foot yet. So I said, instead of burning out by getting pressured for, X amount of rounds, why don't you come forward and pressure Tim and force him to fight on his back foot? And, Tim, I don't know if that was ever part of the plan. It didn't look like it, but Tim came forward very, very early. And it's possible, these guys are strategic. I'm sure that was part of the plan to come forward. You know what I'm saying? Jermell Charlo was able to fight back on his back foot. Remember, before Jermell got with Derrick James, he used to fight on his back foot all the time and work behind his jab all the time. So it was nothing for him to do that. Whereas in Tim, we still haven't seen him really have to do it because no one's forced him to do it. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, yeah, Tony, it just really seemed like Tony could not compete. And with Tim, I have to give him a lot of credit because not just from winning the fight, and not just from proving to us that he is an elite fighter. You know, he didn't just be a lot of things that Tony said. A lot of people, you know, even the comments that I had, some of the people who were leaving comments because I picked Tszyu to win by a knockout, but they were saying to me like, "Yo, same thing with Tony saying, who did you fight?" You know, and Terrell Gausha was probably the best fighter on his resume. And he was dropped by him in the first round. You know, it was a competitive fight. So people are looking at it like, well, if you can compete, you know, have a competitive fight with Terrell Gausha, and Tony Harrison has a win over Jermell Charlo, and Tony Harrison is a good boxer, and he has been in there with some of the top guys at 154. How are you going to be able to compete with him? Well, it doesn't really always work that way. You know what I'm saying? Because Tim, yes, he hasn't fought the very, very best yet. Tony has lost just about to all the best fighters he had fought. You know, and not only that, and it was a key thing, and I brought this up in one of the breakdowns that I did. I know I did a couple of videos, but one of the things I said is like, look, I had a hard time trying to pick how this fight was going to play out. You know, and it was so many different outcomes. Let's just say that Tszyu got exposed. Like, let's say he really all this time wasn't as good as we thought he was, right? We see that sometimes in boxing. If that's the case, what if Tony is able to hurt him, drop him, and actually get him out of here? You know, or what if Tszyu, you know, just couldn't get it going at any point, and Tony was able to hold him off and outbox him for 12 rounds? You know, that was another option. You know, and then you're looking at Tim, and you think like, all right, I'm expecting Tim to get the KO, but let's just say he just came out of 2 fights not getting a KO. You know, he went the distance with Terrell Gausha. He went to distance with Takashi Inoue. You know, so I was having a struggle on how to pick it. I think when it came to my bets, I didn't think, I know what I did. When it came to my bets, I went with either the KO for Tszyu, and I hedged it. Decision with Tony Harrison. Think that was a popular way to go. You know, whenever I'm hedging it though, I usually put a smaller amount for the underdog guy. You know what I'm saying? So I can get more back. But my pick was the KO by Tszyu. And Tszyu, what I was really impressed with is his reflexes. His reflexes was on point, especially early, those first few rounds. I think by the 5th round, the 5th round was one of those rounds where I felt like, yeah, Tim landed some big shots, but Tim was taking a lot of punches. You know, he wasn't really trying to get out of the way with anything. But Tim, his reflexes and his defense were pretty sharp early on. And his hand speed was a lot quicker than I've seen in previous fights. I think there were certain rounds where he didn't have that same quickness and sharpness as some of his counters. But early on, the reflexes were very quick. And you can tell by the way Tony was fighting him. Tony was extremely cautious, you know, but Tim did a good job connecting like with jabs and stuff like that and doing little things to throw Tony off, you know. Tony felt trapped very, 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 very early. You know, you might blame it on the ring size or all of this stuff, but, yo, it is what it is. Like, the fight went down the way that it went. And Tszyu, the reflexes, the hand speed, you know, his counter punching was on point, and the angles too. You know, he's not just throwing overhand rights. He's throwing hooks. He's throwing hooks to the body. You know what I'm saying? He's throwing uppercuts. He's throwing a lot of punches. He's countering a lot with different angles. You know, and highly impressed with him. You know, and the way he was able to trap Tony. You know, it didn't take long before Tony's rope, you know, his back started to get against the ropes. And, you know, Tony just really didn't have nothing for him. You know, he was giving him a good fight, but it just wasn't enough. He just never had the real power to really, really bother Tim. He was landing good shots, but Tony is not a huge puncher at this level. Like I said in the breakdown, like he has a lot of knockouts, but when he stepped up, those top tier guys, yes, he was able to buzz Hurd or he buzzed Charlo, but he wasn't really capable of really hurting, any of the top tier guys he's fought. You know what I'm saying? It's weird though. It's also a coincidence how he tends to almost always get stopped in the ninth round. You know, he stopped in the ninth round against Tszyu. He was stopped in the ninth round against Hurd, and he was stopped in the ninth round against who else? Willie Nelson. All right. Jermell went to 11th with him. Yes, Tszyu did win better than anybody I've seen beat Tony. All right. He did it better than Hurd. He did it better than Willie Nelson. He did it better than Jermell because at least even when he was stopped in those fights, at least he boxed better. He was winning in the earlier rounds. I don't think he ever was winning here. All right. And again, the reason why I also picked the KO is because every time Tony has lost, it was by KO. Those last two opponents that Tszyu had, yes, it went the distance, but he went the distance against guys who have lost, who has never stopped in their career. Terrell Gaucher has lost to two other good fighters before losing to Tony Harrison. He lost to Erickson Lubin and he lost to Erislandy Lara, and neither one of those guys was able to stop Terrell Gaucher. Same thing with Inoue. He had one previous loss. He's never been stopped. These guys, yes, they might not have been more talented than Tony, but they were definitely tougher than Tony and more durable than Tony. And that's the reason why those fights went the distance as opposed to this fight where Tony got stopped again. All right. So that was why I picked. For the few of you that's like to pick people based on how they look or expect me to, if you are subscribed to the channel, don't ever expect me to pick people based on how they look or even how much I like them. I will tell you, I'll be very clear, and I'm always clear in these breakdowns and prediction videos. I tell you who I want to win, who I'm rooting for, okay? But then I tell you who I think is going to win, all right? That's two completely different things. I'm rooting for Tony Harrison. I've been watching Tony Harrison way longer than I even knew Tszyu was even existed, all right? I've been watching Tony Harrison, and I like Tony Harrison. I think he's a good boxer. I think he's a pretty cool guy based on what I see on TV and stuff like that. I've never met the man, but he's very funny. I love Tony. He's cool. I wanted him to win, but at the same time, I'm gonna give you the breakdown, and I'm gonna tell you who I think is gonna win, especially when there's money on the line. It's all about the green. It's not about like he gotta look like that. Like, nah, I'm not with that. You dudes that do that. You do that. That's your thing. That's not my thing. I'm picking who I think is going to win the fight. That's two totally different things. All right. So a few of you, I'll be getting my little slick comments here and there. I just got to put that out there, Anyway, Jermell Charlo. Now that Tszyu won, he is the interim WBO champion because Jermell is the full champion. All right. But he had an injury. He broke his hand. And now that fight is supposed to go down. Well, I'll tell you this. I wasn't excited for the Jermell Charlo fight before because I wasn't sure how good Tszyu really was. But now that I've seen that fight and seen that performance and see how well Tim did, now I'm very excited for the fight between him and Jermell Charlo. What do I think? I mean, I'm still leaning towards Charlo, but now I got to go back and watch. I got to go back and watch the Castano rematch. I want to look exactly because I remember Jermell doing way better in that rematch. And I want to be able to compare now because I still think that Castano is one of the best fighters at 154, even with that loss. So I would like to go back and maybe, take a peek at that fight. And then we could definitely discuss that on like a live or something. Who would win when they fight? Charlo wasn't there. But Charlo was with the Showtime commentators, and he was able to say, like, yo, after I get better, I recover, I'm going straight to Tszyu and getting that fight. All right. The Australia crowd looked to be full. Maybe Jermell should just fly out there and get the bag because it's probably a bigger bag if they were to fight out there. Let's be honest. Let's be real. If Tim could have stadium fights like that and that build up in a promotion was as good as this was, because I felt like this was a bigger fight than it was. It feels like it is a diehard boxing fan fight, but at the same time, it felt like it was bigger than that. It felt like a bigger fight. With that being said, I just want to see a fight, and I want Jermell to recover. I'm still leaning towards Jermell, but that's not my final pick. I will do a breakdown or at least discuss it with you guys pretty soon. But yeah, as far as Jermell goes, he is going to be fighting Tony Harrison. Not Tony Harrison. He's going to be fighting Tszyu next. All right, and as far as Tony Harrison, I said if he takes an L, it's going to be hard for him to get another title opportunity. You never know. He is good. He is going to beat other fighters out there. It's just that it's so clear. The blueprint has been proven time and time again how to beat him. Pressure burst pipes, and it's the pressure, man. He can't hold it off for too long. He don't have the power to really hold it off too long. And like this fight here, Tim was able to get in his space really, really soon, really, really early. I don't know what is the next move, but what I would like to see from Tony. I know Erickson Lubin's fighting at 160. I would have always loved to see that fight between Tony Harrison and Erickson Lubin. So if Lubin's ever interested in coming back down, do that. Maybe Tony should move up to 160. Maybe that's another option for him. Maybe move to 160. I know that sounds crazy to y'all, because if you don't have power at 154, why would he go up to 160? Nah, go up to 160. He sparred with a ton of people that's fought at 160 and bigger. You know what I'm saying? And maybe he's stronger there. Maybe he's more powerful there. He's still fast. Yes, he's not the most durable fighter, but maybe he will be better, feel stronger up at 160 if he can't secure anything at 154. But at the elite level, when you get stopped 4 times and you're only 4 losses the same way every single time, maybe you should go up to 160. Maybe it'll work out for you up there, if you can't get any other big fights down at 154. So that's how I feel about him. But, I'm not saying that he's done, he's retiring or anything like that. But, that's always an option. Josh Kelly is now fighting at the weight. You still got Magomed Kurbanov, he's still there. Brian Castano has not returned to the ring since losing to Jermell Charlo. So, that's another rebound fight. It's tough fights, but, those are fights that are of people that's still available. You know what I'm saying? Fight Terrell Gaucher, he was just talking about him. Fight Terrell Gaucher. Fight some of those guys that's there, So, with that being said, I think I said everything. And we'll talk more. We'll be talking more about this fight still, especially with Jermell Charlo and early thoughts of who I think would win. Let me know in the comments about your thoughts on that fight and who you think would win if they were to fight. And I think that's pretty much it. All right. So anyway, please, if you are new here, subscribe to the channel. Please smash the like button. Let me know what you guys thought on the fight and, who would win in that upcoming fight. All right, who did you pick to win? If any of you were wrong, let me know in the comments and let me know how you feel about Tszyu winning the fight. How do you feel about Tony Harris? If you are wrong, people are wrong and we're all wrong. I'm wrong a lot, but if you are wrong, feel free to drop comments. You don't have to disappear for you guys that be talking shit in my comments. All right, so anyway, I'm out. I'll see you guys on the next one.